Most of us are familiar with the quadratic formula, which is x is equals to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But interestingly enough, the question is, where did this formula come from, and why does it always give us the correct answer? The answer to that is simply that this is the result of completing the square. If you complete the square on a general quadratic equation, that takes us to our answer. So if I have this right here, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 right here, I'm leaving off the key numbers a, b, and c, so that later on I can just plug in whatever number I need, and that will take me to my answer. So what I'm doing is I'm solving what's called the general quadratic equation, but without any numbers. Again, the advantage of that is once I've done it once, I will never have to do it again. So how do I do this? You do this by completing the square. The first step is to take the number over. So I will subtract c from both sides. Actually, first step is get rid of the number up front, because the number in front must be 1. So I'll divide by a. And here comes the fractions. Just like in the previous example we did. And so I have that x squared plus b over ax plus c over a is equals to 0. And I got to take that fraction over. So I will subtract c over a on both sides. And that will leave me with x squared plus b over a, x, again I leave a space right here, is equals to negative c over a. Isn't this fun? Well, I got to divide by 2 and I got to square the answer. But if you remember from last time, dividing by 2 is the same thing as simply doubling the denominator. And then I got to square this. And so that'll leave me with b squared over 4a squared. That's kind of like, I got a 4ac right there. That might be going the right direction. And so I go b squared over 4a squared, and I add over here b squared over 4a squared. Just like in the previous example, at this step right now, I have a perfect square trinomial, so I factor it. So this right here is my PST. And so what I go is square root sine square root. And that will give me, open parentheses, x plus b over 2a squared. And then on the other side right here, I got to figure out what I got to multiply this by. Move it slightly. And, well, if I look at my denominators, I got a 4a squared, and I just got an a right here. So I got to multiply this by 4a over 4a. And that will give me negative 4ac plus b squared over 4a squared. And of course, traditionally we write it as b squared minus 4ac. But it's not over 4a squared, is it? Well, now that we have this right here, x plus b over 2a squared is equals to b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. I take the square root on both sides. And so that leaves me with x plus b over 2a. I cannot take the square root of b squared minus 4ac, so I'll just leave it. B squared minus 4ac. And of course, I add my plus or minus because I want the complete answer. But I can take the square root of the denominator. The square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of a squared is a. We're getting pretty close. In fact, one step remains. I gotta simply take the b squared over to get the x by itself. And so I have right here that x is equals to negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But this is traditionally written in one line as x is equals to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that, my friends, is the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula always gives you the same answer as completing the square, because quadratic formula is completing the square. Completing the square can be used on any equation, and therefore the quadratic formula can be used on any equation. Let's take a quick example, and let's solve the equation 4x squared minus 12 is equals to 2x. The key thing about solving an equation using the quadratic formula is that you need a calculator and you need to have things lined up properly. And what that means is that everything needs to be on one side. The equation needs to equal 0. And so I got to take that 2x over, and so I will subtract 2x from both sides. That leaves me 4x squared minus 2x minus 12 is equals to 0. And now that I have done this, I can identify A, B, C. A is the coefficient of the squared term. B is the coefficient of the x term. C is the constant, the term without an x. So now that I have identified A, B, and C, I plug them into the quadratic formula that I have memorized, because I did this like 500 times until I have it memorized down to the bone. And so I will have them that x is equals to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and then the entire thing is divided by 2 times a. Oh, I know what a is. A is 4. And so that's equals to 2 plus or minus square root of 4. 4 times 12 is 48. 48 times 4 is 48 times 4. 8 4s are 32. 4 4 is 16. And then it's going to be a negative, so it's going to be plus 192 over 8. And so that's equals to 2 plus or minus the square root of 196 over 8. And if you're like me, you're not 100% sure what the square root of 196 is, but let's try. 12 times 12 is 144. 13 times 13 is 169. Can you tell I've done this before? 14 times 14 is 196. So therefore, this is equals to 2 plus or minus 14. Square root of 196 is 14 over 8. Again, x equals all of this. So that means either x equals 2 plus 14 divided by 8, or x equals 2 minus 14 divided by 8. 2 plus 14 is 16 over 8 is 2, or 2 minus 14, that's negative 12. And that's equals to negative, I can divide by 4, so that's 3 halves. And those are my two answers by using the quadratic formula. Thank you. Again, the main thing that you need to worry about when it comes to your quadratic equation is that you have to identify A, B, and C correctly. I could have rewritten this problem as negative 2x plus 4x squared minus 12 equals 0, this would be A, this would be B, and this would be C. You have to get them right. That's the main error, place where you can make an error. And on the inside, right here, you have to just count the number of signs you have. I have 2 signs, so it becomes positive. If you have an odd number of minus signs, it would be negative. Alright, thank you.